It's my responsibility as a leader that is committed to creating a safe working space to at least do something to examine or to look into any allegations that raise concerns about the workplace.
Anonymous sources have claimed that the decision in question allowed a specific candidate to run for our party despite serious sexual assault allegations.
I don't have a rule book that's been handed down to me from Wilfrid Laurier as leader of the Liberal Party on how to handle these situations.
Hashtag #MeToo has come for Parliament Hill, and it is taking an all-party approach, all three major parties, dealing with accusations of misconduct or sexual harassment. And there are now 3 independent investigations to come. How is the Hill handling the pressure? At Issue is here to talk about that and more. Chantal Hébert of the Toronto Star, of course, joins us from Montreal. Tonight, though, Jason Markusoff of Maclean's Magazine. He joins us from Calgary. And Marie Vestel of Le Devoir is not far from me here in Ottawa tonight. Good to see everybody. Chantal, let me start with you. So, I mean, you could have expected that this would land here. It started in provincial politics. It's now landed here. What do you make of the way the 3 leaders have handled the various allegations and accusations?
I tend to say as best they could, and I'll single out the 2 that you showed, Andrew Scheer and Jagmeet Singh. In both cases, under pressure from people in their own caucus. In the case of Jagmeet Singh, the concerns, if you want to call them that, expressed about a fellow colleague in caucus came from an MP. In the case of Andrew Scheer, it was his own MPs. Michel Rempel, but also some of his former leadership rivals who were in public raising questions and saying they wanted a more thorough process to find out what happened. So once the pressure comes from inside your caucus, your options are really limited.
And in terms of how they're dealing with it, Marie, all 3 of them have decided to bring in outside investigators. Does that bode well for the people at the heart of this, or is it just too late for them anyway?
Yeah, I think I agree with Chantal. I think they dealt with it as best they could. But some people are starting to say, though, on the Hill, at least one Liberal MP, that perhaps some of this is moving a little too fast. I think the issue here is that we have 3 cases now on Parliament Hill, one in each party, that are quite different in what the allegations are, in how they were brought forward, what is being reproached to the MPs in question. And some, at least one Liberal MP, is saying, you know, perhaps it doesn't always need to be public just right away. Perhaps we can use the example of what happened in Nova Scotia with Jamie Bailey, which there were concerns raised to the party. There was a third-party investigation, and then the results were made public once a conclusion after a thorough process established that, yes, there was a problem in his case.
Although, Jason, I mean, both Chantal and Marie are making the point, you're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because if you aren't transparent about it, then you will be viewed as hiding something, I would think would be the natural sort of conclusion if you did it that way.
Exactly. Everybody's scrambling, and in this regard, it's good that they're not scrambling toward, and resulting in hiding things, in trying to hold things back. They're scrambling and they're looking toward disclosure. Nobody wants to be the one who's caught sweeping this under the rug. I mean, one of the biggest reckonings right now, one of the biggest structural issues right now, is the concerns about what might have happened in 2015 and perhaps prior with this Rick Dykstra case. Yeah. So people are scrambling, and it's messy. This is revolutions are messy. There is no rule book. There's no set of penalties out for certain misdeeds or misregards. We're figuring this out. This is going to be a messy couple of years for this. I think everybody, men and women and accusers, leaders, should just hang tight for a couple of years probably of messiness while we figure out the processes around these things.
Although that's going to make things awkward. I mean, I was talking to a couple of people yesterday, MPs, who said to me, they're good guys. They said, I'm a good guy, but I don't know what I can do anymore. I don't want to have coffee with women. I'm terrified about everything because I don't know how it's going to be construed. So, Chantal, how do you operate?
Give me a break.
Well, that's just what they were saying to me. Go ahead.
We've all spent time on Parliament Hill. I've had coffee with a number of male MPs over the past 30 years without feeling that in any way, shape, or form anything bad was happening. So if that's where they're going, fine. But it also says that they haven't totally integrated the notion that the women who sit next to them are colleagues, and that colleagues do have coffee together.
Well, that's a good point. But Marie, I don't know. I mean, you've been up on the Hill more than I have this week. Have you had that sense as well, that there's a certain anxiety, maybe is the right word?
Well, I think so, but they won't tell you openly because they don't want to be portrayed as, jerks who don't realize they're being jerks, as Michelle Rempel said it in her speech on Monday, just don't be jerks. Yeah. But I think to go back to what we've seen also develop, I find this week, is also the issue for staffers. It's been talked a lot about this week, also on social media, and I spoke to this Bloc Québécois ex-employee who came out after Erin Weir's situation was made public, and who said she felt uncomfortable with him. And she did say, I didn't want to say anything when I still worked on the Hill prior to her departure before Christmas, because she said, you work for a party, you don't want to hurt your party. These are MPs, they're your bosses. You're in a job that you can lose at any minute. You don't have job security, and so I think the whole debate around the harassment in the workplace bill and what is going on now, I think it is also shining a light perhaps on the situation that we maybe didn't really think of, that MPs are not necessarily in the same situation as a staffer. Sometimes they're quite young, who doesn't have all the resources.
Okay, I want to throw to the next topic, and we're going to do a very quick go-around on it. Here's a little clip of Caroline Mulroney when we asked her not so long ago, do you have a political future?
I think politics is definitely something that I've always thought about as a career, and what I've learned from watching my father and so many of our friends participate in it, it's all about timing and opportunity and getting all those things right. So.
Okay, and so what would it take to get you to run? Would we be talking about the next election, a by-election?
There are a lot of things that have to be in place.
It appears those things are now in place because Caroline Mulroney is going to launch her bid for the leadership of the Ontario Progressive Conservatives. Christine Elliott, former MP who's tried this before, is also going to make a bid. Jason, without getting too deep into things, there does seem to be sort of a dynasty thing happening. And Canada's not the only place, of course, that this happens. But if Caroline Mulroney throws her hat in the ring, I mean, that's a pretty interesting family story at any rate.
Absolutely, and I couldn't imagine a Mulroney of coming forward to run in, say, the mid-90s. Time's been good for the legacy of Brian Mulroney. I mean, people now think of him as the guy who brought in NAFTA, certainly after this week in his presentation down south, as opposed to thinking of him as the guy from Airbus, the Airbus affair and GST. Trudeau as well. People thought, a lot of people, I would speak to voters in 2015, and they would talk about his legacy on immigration, especially people in the new Canadian community. So this is simple brand leverage in some ways.
But the brand leverage, Chantal, does it still, I mean, I think that's an interesting point Jason makes. Can you demarcate yourself enough from your father or your family in order to make a good run?
Well, if you'd run Trudeau in the mid-90s in Quebec, I suspect that Trudeau would have had to find a day job. So time does make a difference. Yeah. And I think in the case of Justin Trudeau, we've seen that Quebec voters now see him and not his father. For good or for bad, so it is possible to make the transition. But the big thing about it's not so much dynasty, it's name recognition. Mm-hmm. In a time when most parties, all parties, I think, have moved to one member, one vote leadership selection processes. And on that basis, that gives you quite a leg up. Remember the social media following of Justin Trudeau when he ran? If only a fraction of those people voted in a leadership process, he was going to become leader.
Only about 30 seconds, Marie. I mean, there's another dynasty here, and that's Doug Ford, who's also going to be in that same race. And there are people that loved Rob Ford and that will enjoy Doug Ford as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different dynasty, and it's a different demographic, I think, that they're going for. But I mean, I think you get name recognition, and I think it will help Doug Ford and Caroline Mulroney. But that being said, I don't think name recognition in a general campaign is necessarily enough to overgo experience. And in the case of Caroline Mulroney, I would argue maybe that could be the challenge, the fact that she hasn't been an MP. And if you remember another dynasty kid, Justin Trudeau, he was an MP for a few years, and in that span of time before he was in the limelight, he did rather put his foot in his mouth a few times on China, on Quebec independence, but he had the luxury to do so when he wasn't, instantly running for a general election and a premiership. Perhaps that can't be overlooked.
Thank you all. Appreciate that good chat this week.